So we have here with us Bharat, who is the co-founder and CEO of Anycover. Anycover is a Singaporean insurtech startup focusing on product protection for e-commerce. And they're actually our alumni and finalists from FWD Alpha Startups for Insurtech Cohort 2. And Bharat is here to be sharing with us his journey on building their MVP. So I'll just pass on the floor to you.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for that, Sabha. So I have some slides prepared, but I would like this to be more interactive. So feel free to stop me at any point and then ask me questions. That I think is probably a good way to have this conversation. So let me try sharing my screen first. Okay. Cool. You guys see my screen, right?
Yep.
Okay. Awesome. So is this the last session for the day, Safa? Or
Yeah.
So I'm the only person between the weekend. And,
yeah.
And I've heard it's a long weekend. Is that the case?
Yep, we're going to be having a public holiday on Monday.
Right. Yeah, someone just told me it was a long weekend, and I was surprised because when you're running a startup, there are no long weekends.
So, it's okay. They're startups. They've got no weekends. It's just work. That's all they
have. That's true. Yeah. Cool. So let me start off with just introduction. I mean, the key point I want to make here is I'm not a product person. So this is what I'm sharing is mainly coming from personal learnings, personal experience. So take it with a pinch of salt, and I mean, try to challenge the thinking, and So it's coming from personal experience. So take it from that lens. So very quickly about me. I mean, before Anycover, I was doing corporate development for Axiata Digital, doing investments, fundraising for them. Did some good deals in Malaysia. So I spent almost a decade in Malaysia before I moved to Singapore. I mean, really love the country, and I was in KL all the time. So I really love the city. If given a choice, I would, maybe move back to KL, in seconds. So yeah, some very good deals. So what that gave me was exposure to various industries like e-commerce, financial services, e-retail, music streaming, and so on, right? Micro insurance. So it gave me exposure on both sides, both the buy side and the sell side. So in the initial years, I was doing largely investments for the group, which was analyzing businesses, making sure the business model is sound, and our investment thesis is sound, and then investing in them. And then towards the end, it was more about fundraising for our existing businesses. So it was more getting our value proposition right, pitching that to the investors, getting them in believing our long-term vision and our business model and what we're doing. So it gave me a good exposure to both sides of the table. And that is what I think gave me a confidence in terms of, okay, now it's probably time for me to build something, and that then led to me moving to Singapore to pursue Anycover. So I think Safa did give a very brief overview about us. So I think maybe if I can take 2 minutes just to explain what we do, because I mean, largely what I share is from from this, right? So what we are is in an essence a B2B2C insurtech. So we empower online merchants of any size to build extended warranties for them, and then so they can offer it to their customers. So think of it like Apple Care Plus for any merchant out there. So Apple has an amazing Apple Care program. Consumers, lap it up. Globally, Apple does $8 billion just in Apple Care Plus, and makes around 60-70% margins. And it also includes components like accidental damage and so. And Apple is able to do so because it passes on the whole risk associated with it to an insurance company, in this case AIG. But these small merchants are not able to do so because they can't get into the same room with the likes of AIG, because these insurance companies will have a long list of processes. They will come up with minimum premium commitments, so they wouldn't even get to speak to these small medium-sized merchants, right? So in most instances, these merchants just end up offering manufacturer warranty, and they're left out of making more revenue, driving customer loyalty, and so on, right? So that we saw was a very clear gap, and that's what we are trying to solve for. How do we get these large insurance partners to a large number of small and medium-sized merchants, and at the same time solve the customer experience, which is traditionally plaguing the warranty industry now. I mean, you think of warranties, I mean, it's a nightmare, right? You have a product breakdown, you call someone, you wait for 20-30 minutes in the line until you get to speak to the right person, and then you file a claim, you wait for 2 weeks for it to be resolved, and so on. So whereas the technology in e-commerce has moved so much faster, but still the warranty claims, filing, registration, everything is still very much legacy. So that's what we're trying to solve for. So that, in a nutshell, is what Anycover is about. So I think that it'll probably help you guys relate a bit more to some of the things that I try to share. So yeah. Then moving, I mean, I find it always good to start with the definition. I'm sure I think you probably have gone through some, like a session around this, you've gone through the material, right? So I will try to keep this short, just try to bring out, I think, key points, which were, for me, I thought were pretty key. So, I mean, yeah, as the definition goes, MVP is that version of the new product, which allows team to collect the maximum amount of validated learning about customers with the least effort. So, I mean, obviously, 3 key things that it's about collecting maximum amount of validated learning about customers and least effort, right? So we have to be careful in defining each of these items, because that could then result in, are you planning your MVP properly? Is it going to work or not work, right? So first, you need to be really careful about defining your customers. It could be very wide, and then you would end up serving no one, or you could be too narrow, and then you wouldn't end up then scaling at next stage, right? So it's very important to have the right set of customers, even for the purpose of MVP planning. So for us, for example, we knew small and medium-sized merchants were, as a category, important for us. We knew product categories which are relevant, like electronics, say sports equipment, optics, audio equipment, and so on, right? But we had to, for the purpose of MVP, we had to even narrow down. So we said we're going to only focus on Shopify merchants for the MVP, because it's one single platform. It's much easier to build something for one single platform, as opposed to various other merchants building their own, having their platforms using bespoke tools. So that was our focus when it comes to building the MVP. And then the other thing then to consider is that to validate learning, right? So you have to create an MVP for the purpose of validating. So I will come more on that. And also you try to do it with the least effort. And least effort means not really, I think, cutting corners, but more about you have to do it quickly and in cheaply, right? Like in a very cost-effective manner. So that would go under. You need to roll it out fast, but also at the same time not bust your budgets. So that is what it is. I mean, you guys would know it's essentially the intersection of the minimum product that you need to get your customers your value proposition validated, and what you think viably can you build, right? So, I mean, naturally, then what makes a good MVP? To begin with, I think key characteristics of MVP would be just focus solely on core features that offer value. It should be devoid of any bells and whistles, because while building, people, emotional factors also creep in. You feel pretty strongly about having certain feature because it looks funky. You think it's going to make your customer happy and you personally are, passionate about it. But I mean, it's not, MVP is not the place for it, right? You don't want to have anything fancy or anything which is not serving the purpose, which is validating. So that's the whole purpose of MVP. It's designed to validate. Whereas products are built for, for making customers happy, serving a need, and so on, right? But MVP is not built to maybe serve a need particularly or to make customers happy. You always build an MVP to validate. So I mean, this is an example, right? So it's because you think of minimum viable product, you think, okay, fine, I have like 10 sets of features, I'm going to select these 10 features, and that's my MVP. So that's not. So you're completely missing out on offering any value. So the one that you see on the left, the remedy you see on the left, it's terrible. Whereas you're trying to balance some features, and it's bad to okay. But what's a great MVP is to really identify those core set of features which will deliver the maximum value to your end customers. So that is what goes into MVP, and that's how we should think of every step that goes in building MVP. So the way we approached this was, I mean, largely 3 steps. One is you always start with your value proposition, and that comes from your research, ideating, customer interviews, market research, and and then you come up, okay, this is what you think. It's based on many hypotheses, right? And the second step is then to state those hypotheses. State your main assumptions. What do you believe is true, so that you think that your value proposition is going to work, right? You need to list them out, and then you need to identify, how do I then validate those? Because if those assumptions fail, then your value proposition is not true anymore. You don't have a business model, and so on, right? And the last step is then, once you know what you have to validate, how do you get there? What goes in, what goes out, right? So that's, I mean, it's a simple approach that we took. So this is, I mean, for us, in terms of nailing the value propositions. So as I said, we are at the nexus of merchants, consumers, and insurance companies. So we provide value to all the stakeholders in the ecosystem, right? So for merchants, straightforward. They get increased revenue whenever a warranty plan is being sold. They see high conversion rates, but that, I mean, just the fact that a warranty is being advertised, it's a strong signal of trust behind the product quality, because that someone else is willing to stand behind it, right? So it's a strong signal of product quality to the end consumers, and that means that even if the warranty is not purchased, the conversion rates go up. So very classic, like Amazon deploys this trick. It sells warranties on, say, $50 backpacks. I mean, it knows that people are not going to buy probably extended warranties on a $50 backpack, because we'll probably use it for a year and throw away, right? But it still does so because just the fact that it's there, it increases their conversion rates. And of course, high consumer loyalty, high customer loyalty, because once you have a broken product, that's an extremely negative experience. The brands who successfully convert a negative experience into a positive customer experience are the brands who the consumers are going to be loyal to, right? So that's going to drive your customer loyalty, and that, which means more recurring sales and so on. So that's great for brands. For consumers, our proposition is clear and concise terms, because today you see long list of terms and conditions. You're not really clear what is covered, what is not covered. So we give them in plain English, no legalese, and it's quick claim settlement. In the sense that no more calling during business hours, trying to make time out of business outside of business hours. So we have a chatbot which does 24/7 claims, so they can use that. No more registering of your warranty, filing your details, your serial code, everything. We capture all of that automatically. So that's the value proposition. And of course, peace of mind for the products that they buy. For insurance partners, we are opening up a large channel, an e-commerce distribution channel, which they don't have access to. They work with large merchants, large brands, but not the remaining 95% of the merchants out there, right, who are small and medium. So we aggregate that demand and then bring it to them. We also, come up with new product categories for them. By that I mean two things. One is, say, items like sports equipment or optics, which are not traditionally associated. That's something they can underwrite now. And also, two, because we are entirely digital, we generate like a constant pipeline of products that insurance providers can underwrite. So by that I mean, say, headsets, is accidental damage effective for headsets? So if it is yes, then there's a separate plan for it, right? There's different pricing which goes into it, different coverage benefits and so on. So that becomes, from an insurance point of view, that's a new product. Again, for sports equipment, if we're going to cover, say, power surge, is there demand for it? So that becomes a new product for them. So, ability to play around with these coverage benefits, ability to play around with the term, whether people taking a 1 year plans for headphones, 2 years, 3 years, all these decisions result in pricing of it, and how do they take the risk. So it becomes a new product for them. So this is something we can do, constantly generate. And we can come up with like new products. Let's say you've defined for sports and equipment as a category. You can all constantly create new products, right? Like there's like rowing machines. There is, new set of electrical trainers. Now there are skiing trainers, skiing machines, and so on. So these are not products people would think of, initially. So that's something, it's a constant pipeline that we would generate for them. So these were our value propositions, right? So you think of every stakeholder in what you're serving, and then think of, hypothesize around these value propositions that you can offer them. Then following that is you have to state your main assumptions, like what has to be true, right? So for us, what has to be true is, one, customers want extended warranties and accidental damage protection. If they don't, then everything falls flat. There's no business, right? If we can come up with these fancy terms, but at the end of it, if the consumer is not interested, then that's it, right? There's no. So that's the assumption that you need to state. Two, small, medium-sized merchants are not able to build their extended warranty today, because if they could, then again, there is no business. So fine, they're running their warranty program. They don't need another third-party provider to do anything for them. And three, they're willing to integrate with third-party, like someone like us, right? So they're willing to open up their website, willing to take that integration risk, willing to open up their data and all for someone like us. So that's a big assumption. And also our ability, like, is it technically feasible even to inject these warranty plans and prices into the merchant store, and merchant has to accept that as well. So because that's going to change his store configuration, like, how many products he has, what is the pricing associated with the products, and so on, right? So he should be accepting of that. And customers want protection plan customized to their needs, in the sense that today you walk into, say, Harvey Norman, it's just one plan, right? You take it or leave it. Whereas what we want to offer is, do you want like a 1 year plan? Do you want a 2 year plan? Do you want accidental damage? So there's, there various components that go into fixing up those plans. So is there really demand for that, right? So that's a big assumption. And using data, can we then dynamically underwrite? So what happens today is these insurance providers largely underwrite using static data tables. So they look at, say, laptops. They look at historically for a merchant, say Harvey Norman. They look at, okay, how many laptops have you sold in the past 3 years? Various brands, what have been the failure rates, what have been the the loss rates, claim rates, and then based on that they do an analysis and they come up with the pricing, and people stick with that pricing for, say, 6 months to 1 year. Whereas our value proposition is, we do everything real time, dynamic, so we can update. We know attach rates in real time, right? We know failure rates in real time. We know exactly by brand, is Lenovo versus Dell versus some other brand. So that enables us to price the warranty real time as well. So products which have high loss rates, claim rates would be priced high. So consumers that also deters consumers from purchasing those products. They would go for something which is more cheaper in terms of warranty coverage as well, because that's likely to last longer. So that's the assumption that we are stating, in the sense that we can dynamically underwrite these pricing. And of course, I mean, just profitably scale across multiple categories as well. So again, this is just an illustrative list that, I thought I'd come up with just to, demonstrate. So, I mean, not all assumptions have to be or can be validated by the MVP, in the sense that, so not all assumptions can be validated by the MVP, right? So some can be validated by research. For example, this consumers want extended warranties and accident damage protection. This is easily validated by research. I mean, look at Apple Care's revenue, the profits it makes. Look at, speak to people at Harvey Norman, speak to people at insurance providers who are covering Harvey Norman. They'll tell you that, they do around $5-10 million of warranty business with Harvey Norman every year. So there is clearly demand for that, right? So that itself is validated by research. And you observe these merchants, you go through their websites, you know that large number of merchants are only offering manufacturer warranty. So that's been validated. You're validated by observing. You don't need to build a product to validate that. And you also see that a lot of these merchants have the likes of BNP players integrated into their website, like Hula, Atomi, GrabPay as well. So you know that, okay, these merchants, these are small, medium size, not large, but they are still opening up, integrating their systems up with these third-party players. So that's again validated by observing, right? You don't need to build a product just for that. Whereas the rest we had to validate. So that became then the focus of our MVP, and then going forward as well, because it's not everything can be validated just with an MVP. I think it's a constant process. So you start with few, the next version will validate few more and so on, right? So it goes on up until you really hit PMF. So, I mean, the product market fit. And also for some items which have to be validated, it's also important that you set KPIs that will also, determine what information you need to capture, and that will help you, in planning your MVP better. Like it's important for us that, we capture attach rates. It's important for us that we capture claim rates. So just as an example, what attach rate means is that, let's say if 100 customers have browsed through the same product, let's say headset, but only 100 customers have bought the headset, but only 10 customers have bought the warranty plan with the headset, then the attach rate is 10%. So what that means is that we need to capture data not only around, the people buying headsets, but people buying warranties, but we also have to capture data around people buying headsets and not buying warranty, because that's important, right? We need to track that metric. So it's important that, that we list out these KPIs, because then you plan what information you capture in your MVP, which means you plan, how it is structured, what features are going to come up and so on. So once I think you've identified your set of assumptions to be validated, then you see, you come up with the list of features, and you see, is it going to be put now into MVP, or is it something that I can do later? So I mean, the way we thought of it is that any feature which was validating the core value proposition and enabling us to capture information for the next stage, that went into the now bucket. And features which will then help scale will go into, should have for us, but then we'll go in the next round, because then for that we need funding. And then features which ease our operational workload are more like could have features. I mean, if we have time and resources, we would build that, right? So that's the way we've prioritized it. Just as an example, so everything that was absolutely critical in making sure the whole transaction is complete went into our MVP. So which means injecting it into the merchant's website, capturing the customer detail, integrating into the cart, the customer accepting it, we recording the transaction, sending the customer an email that you purchase this product. So the whole transaction, any component that goes into that was a must-have for us, so that we can at least validate the whole end-to-end transaction. And we also wanted to have like at least one channel for consumer claims, because that we had certain validations, certain assumptions around the consumer's value proposition, right? So we wanted to have a channel for that as well. And should have features were more like helping us scale next level. So lookalike pricing for warranty plans. Like as I said, we have plans for say treadmills and elliptical machines, but now let's say there's a skiing machine which comes in, and can we quickly price it without going back to the insurer? Because usually the underwriting process with the insurer takes about 6 months, right? So that won't help us scale. If we have a merchant, we have a product, we should be able to price it pretty quickly and see, have some thresholds. If it falls below a certain threshold, then we say, okay, fine, this pricing is not working, we relook at it, right? But up until that, we price based on lookalike algorithms. So that's obviously a should have for us. It's just we couldn't build it now because that needs data, that needs more development and so on. So that being pushed to the next stage. And also APIs for other platforms, like but right now we only build for Shopify. So say building it for Magento, WooCommerce, BigCommerce, right? So that goes into the next stage. So yeah, so that I think is how we've defined, right? So some learnings from that process is there's absolutely no shame in putting function over form. So this, as an example, on the left side is how it looked for our first demo. So what you see is a pop-up, a modal pop-up of demo store. So it shows that, hey, you want to add, it pulls up the product details and it pulls up pricing API. It shows for 1 year, so and so, 2 years, so and so. It was like a pretty shitty drop down, and then the whole layout is very basic, right? And then you can add it, but it's completely functional, so it will complete the whole transaction. And still, it's good because it proves our technical capability that we can do it. Completely functional, selects customer selection, completes the whole order process. So we were happy to go ahead with it as part of our first demo. And then subsequently, of course, you make it more visually appealing as well. So then you add on other visually appealing features. So again, the point I want to make is you don't have to make it fancy to begin with. Just make sure that the core function works, and then you can then beautify it, make sure it looks good for the end consumer, so there is take up. And use open source pre-built modules where possible. So this is an example of a chatbot. It enables for you to start a warranty claim or track an existing claim. So what it's capable of is it's capable of conversational AI. It's deep learning capable. It has voice to text enabled, so you can just say that, hey, I have a claim to make, and it'll recognize. And it's also omni-channel supported. So we are on web, we are on WhatsApp. We could easily integrate with Telegram and so on. So it looks pretty fancy, right? I mean, it looks very high tech, but it only cost us like $200 to build. And how did we do that? We used AWS Lex. It's a platform behind Alexa. We used free credits from AWS, and it took us like a week of development time. So, I mean, all the costs that you see there is essentially just development time and testing time. So that's what we did. So the point is, technology has moved so far ahead. Now it's increasingly becoming easy to come up with fancy MVPs, and by fancy I mean not unnecessary features, but critical features. You can just use these pre-built modules, a lot of plug and play features out there. You can just integrate for free, integrate for cheap, and that will enable you to come up with solid set of features pretty quickly, right? So no shame in doing so, and you should always encourage you to do that. If not, I mean, the alternate would have been like, us manning calls 24/7 to hear customers complain about their product failures, right? So this makes our life so much easier. So some mistakes to avoid while building the MVP is skipping the prototyping phase. Like you think what you think you have the end goal in mind, and then you just want to start building, right? But I would heavily advise against that, because I personally figured that out. Like, it always helps to put things on, say, Figma, or some prototyping tool. So what it does is it visually paints exactly how it's going to look like. So that will make your front-end development way quicker. And also you will start thinking about features or functions which you wouldn't think of, in terms of, okay, if I click this, what should happen next? If I sorry, I'm not sure what happened. If in the whole process, after this, what should be the next step? So these things you only come up with as you are in a prototype phase. And then inappropriate using development method. So just give me 1 minute. I will think my light is off. Okay. Yeah, sorry for that. Yeah, so the other mistake would be to not know your development method and your tech stack. There are various development methods out there, like waterfall, which is very old. Even with Agile, there are a few, right? Like Kanban, Scrum. So we used Agile with Kanban because we were a pretty small team. It was much easier visually for us to look at who's doing what and are the cards moving, and giving comments on the functionalities and so on. Whereas Scrum is great, I think, for a bit larger teams, more planned, much more planned development, because at an MVP stage, you're not really sure how it's going to turn out, right? And you don't even know what features will go into. You're only constantly experimenting. So I would suggest go with an approach which is as flexible and agile as possible. And also important to define your tech stack early, because it goes a long way. You'll have to end up redoing a lot of stuff. Sorry, I'm just reading out a question there. Someone with a product background told me that a mobile app as interface should be the last option, unless that's the only interface that can be used, because everyone is building apps and there are too many apps in the graveyard after the initial app is gone. It's a university too. Right. Actually, that's a good question, because at one point we were also considering whether we should have a mobile app, but we realized that warranty is not like on top of the mind for consumers. People buy products, maybe like once a month. These products which are valuable can be protected, right? So once a month and so on, and they would probably claim, like once in 6 months or so, right? So it's not, and they would maybe track and look at it, say, maybe once a month or once in a few months. So it's not something which is like on top of their mind. So because it's not on top of their mind, there's no need to have an app for it. If you should have an app wherein consumer is interacting it on a daily basis, or quite frequent basis. If it's something he's going to interact with you once a month, once in a few months, but it's a valuable interaction, then there is no need for an app. And also more so for us, because we are B2C, we are going via the merchant route. So there was then no point for us to have an app. We were thinking whether we should have an app so consumer can track their existing warranty, right? Like a vault. So I have a PlayStation, I have a laptop, I have a phone. Are they covered, not covered? Having everything in one place, so it's easy to claim. So then, but still, we thought, okay, doesn't make sense to have an app. So I think that's how I would say. It really depends on your business model and how relevant is your value proposition to the end customer. It's and also particularly for MVP, I would I suggest avoid building apps directly, because to get consumer to download an app is very expensive. It's not that straightforward. Whereas getting someone to visit a website is much more relatively easier than making sure someone downloads an app. So I would suggest, to the extent that it's possible, you should try to validate with just a a website or a web application rather than having a mobile app. I mean, you could make it mobile friendly, right? I mean, for example, our website, everything that we build is mobile friendly. So you can make it mobile friendly, but for the MVP stage, I would, not suggest just jumping into the mobile app unless you have, like you loaded with funding, and then you exactly know what customer segment, and you exactly know that they're going to download. Then I think I would suggest, but I think that would be a rare case. So okay, cool. So yeah, so I think then going back to the mistakes. Yeah, so I was saying important for the tech stack because it goes a long way in terms of defining your future development efforts. So for example, we went with JavaScript as a base language. We went with Node.js, backend, frontend, React, and so on, right? The reason for us to go with this tech stack was, one, we wanted to be highly responsive and scalable. So JavaScript enables that because we are slotted into the different merchants' web browsers and websites, right? Which consumers will view via web browser. So it has to be browser friendly. It has to be flexible across different browsers and so. So we thought, okay, that going with that as a full stack would be way efficient. And also JavaScript enabled us because it's the same language used for both front end and back end. So we could repurpose developers. So someone working on back end can then start working on front end. Someone working on front end can do vice versa, right? So it's important. So, like for example, I didn't have any insights around this. But the way I figured it out was speaking to people, speaking to tech guys, explaining them what I wanted to build, and then asking them in terms of what should be the tech stack, what should be the high level architecture. So it's basically taking their feedback and then completely relying on it. So again, you should always do that. But that said, so this is more like you have to be prepared for tech stack because it has some long-term consequences. You don't want to be constantly checking. But that said, at the same time, you should also not be afraid of incurring technical debt. And what technical debt means is that you go ahead with some feature, you write a code for it, and in future you have to rewrite it. So that's you're putting effort, right? So you're rewriting it or changing a component. So that's technical debt. So one way of doing it is people want to future proof it. Say that, okay, I'm going to build in this way. I'm going to make it so standardize across various functions so that I don't have to rewrite everything. But that's not the way to do it for MVP. Just as an example, like for example, our Shopify interface was on Polaris, and we built our merchant dashboard interface, everything on React, right? Plain version. Whereas our chatbot was on Vue.js. It's a version of React, but another framework called Vue.js. The reason for that was it was readily integratable with AWS and enabled us to launch within days. Whereas our landing page is using Gatsby, which enables, it's a different framework which enables us to make beautiful landing pages pretty quickly. So you could see just within a small component, like we're using different frameworks, different settings. So we knew that, we were cognizant of it, and it enabled us to build things pretty quickly. And over a period of time, we'll standardize everything to React.js, right? Standardize the libraries and so on. So again, you should go ahead and do that, because rather than us building everything in say React, which would mean our chatbot would have taken 3-4 weeks more to launch, or the Shopify would have taken much more, a landing page which would have taken much more time to launch and so on, right? So go ahead with ready-made frameworks, ready-made libraries, and you can standardize it over a period of time. And also, because you start off as a very small team, it's important to clearly identify the product and tech roles. So someone has a very clear product vision, is taking those decisions around what goes in, what goes out, and someone around tech is more contributing in terms of is it feasible, not feasible, and also making decisions around what goes in, in terms of tech and what goes out, right? So it's important to have that responsibility. Like, for example, for example, I was playing the product role in building this. I couldn't have done that without anyone taking the technical ownership, right? Like me speaking directly to the developers wouldn't go anywhere. Like, you need like someone who's technically owning the whole stuff. Again, that said, just the developers or someone, just the tech guy would not be able to build this without understanding, the product features, like how do we attach the warranty plans? How do we think about pricing? How do we think about what options to give, right? So you need to clearly define roles and have both work pretty closely. And what completely outsourcing? I mean, we did this because both myself and my co-founder were from a business background. We didn't have a tech background. So for the initial phase, we outsourced it, but we knew that it's going to be a nightmare to just outsource and let them run. So we had a technical advisor who would advise us on a part-time, get on, weekly calls, get on, sometimes alternate day calls with the team members, making sure they're doing it right. So his role was more around setting up the tech architecture, guiding them at a high level. And then, I would then do, what features goes in, goes out, right? So you always need that technical oversight. So I would suggest just, blindly outsourcing it and relying on the other party, I wouldn't suggest, because a lot of this, insights have to come from you, right? Has to come from the business. So it's very hard to then translate those insights into product features when you're outsourcing it. And more so because initially your insights are not that solid. You are only guessing half the time, and then you're trying to fine tune, right? So it's always important that you have the tech team as close to you as possible. And if you at all you're doing outsourcing, then I would suggest make it as the arrangement itself as flexible as possible. Like, for example, we were doing them on an hourly billing. So every hour, we would get like screenshots of what they're working on, and we would have access to the whole code. So we could have just, switch off the button anytime we want, and then have the code and the work with us, and then for us to improve. So that's the approach that we took. As opposed to say some develop outsourcing would say that, okay, you pay us X amount of money, we will deliver it in 3-4 weeks. That's more like a project based. So I would, heavily advise against that approach, particularly for MVP, because you can't define that project. You can't define exactly these are the requirements that you need, because you're always figuring it out. So yeah, so that I think are some of the mistakes to avoid. And just I think as a closing note, so if your customers don't find any bugs in your product, you aren't building fast enough. So always prioritize speed. You can keep fixing bugs as you go. So you don't have to be perfect when you pitch to your customers or showcase your product. Just launch, and then you keep fixing it on the go, right? So yeah, so I think so that's about what I had. Feel free to visit our website, learn more as well. So let me pause here, take questions if you guys have any. Yeah.
Yep, so feel free to ask your question. There you go. So there's a question from Hassan here.
All right. So at this stage, no. We've as I said, like we haven't built APIs, but we can, right? Like we have to do some connectors so that it will be bespoke to that marketplace, and we can connect them. So that's an important question, because like marketplaces are part of our GTM. At the moment, we are focusing on Shopify merchants. We also want to focus on like niche marketplaces, right? There are marketplaces who are selling, say, refurbished equipment, marketplaces which sell, say, just furniture. So there's also accidental damage component of it, right? So yeah, we will do that in future, but not at the moment. We don't have the API for it. No, we don't. Yeah, that's a good question. We don't underwrite the products. Because to underwrite the products, you need to be regulated by the Insurance Act in Singapore, and I'm pretty sure in Malaysia as well. So we don't underwrite, but we do take a share of the profit by by like technical services agreement, by management services agreement, and so on. So there are ways, but we need an insurance partner to underwrite it. We don't do that. Yeah, so we have an insurer to underwrite. Yeah. And also going forward, we don't want to underwrite ever, because we don't probably don't want to have the insurance license itself, but we can share, we can get more value and capture more value from the value chain by doing more, right? Like, for example, doing the underwriting as a service. So we can come up with pricing, we can come up with those formulas and tell them this is how you should price, and there's a fee associated to it, but we are not taking the risk. The insurance companies are taking the risk. We do underwriting as a service. It's more like a consulting service, and we get paid for it. We can also then do claims adjudication. So we approve the claims, deny the claims. Again, we are not acting like an insurance company, but we do that again we can do that for a service. So we can capture more of the value chain without necessarily having to be regulated or having to have an insurance license.
Thank you for the explanation. I think what is the, can I know what's the greatest challenge when working with an insurance company?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think one of the greatest challenges is they're very slow, and that probably means a lot, because I come from a corporate background, and even though I was on the digital side of the corporate, I knew how corporate things work, and because telcos are also slow, whereas at least on the digital side we were trying to move things faster. We were much faster, but yeah, just I think, and it's because it's not because the people there are slow or inept or whatever, right? I mean, they are equally smart people, but just that the whole industry, they are very risk averse. The processes are such so that they can't deviate as much. So it takes time to get to that end. So it just takes time. But that said, they are very keen on this space. Everyone is jumping on embedded insurance. Insurance companies are pretty keen on this particular space. So, yeah, it's something that we need to get comfortable that it takes time to get it across the border. Yeah.
See, sorry, I have another question regarding how you guys, I mean, you were saying that you actually collect the data and you do your own underwriting, right? So does it mean that there is no API connected with the insurance companies? You don't issue the policy right away. So it's actually still online acquisition with manual processing with the insurance company?
Yeah, so that's again a good question. So so we broke it up, right? So our value proposition was that we want to get this done entirely digitally. So every component which goes into making sure the whole transaction is done digitally was there, which means that we are doing real-time policy generation. So as a consumer buys, we generate the policy, we give them a contract ID, we give them essentially a policy document saying this is covered, this is not covered. So it's not the insurance giving it them, we do that. And at the back end, we have, we offline do like batch, we share with insurers batch files and so on around that. And they are okay with this approach. So we don't have to wait, for the insurance to then generate a policy, send it to them. Then that completely breaks the whole experience. So yeah, I mean, we break the problem, we do this, and then we share it on the back end. So yeah, so in terms of the integration with insurance at the moment, there's no integration with insurance today. We are doing it offline because it's not critical for at the MVP stage, right? It's not, we can get business done with sharing information on a batch basis every month, every week, and so on with them. But going forward, again, this one of those should have, could haves thing which will come going forward. So going forward, as we become more of try to capture more and more of the value chain, then we'll need to have those APIs built in. as well. So yeah, as of now, it's just offline.
All right, cool. Thanks for explaining.
Cool. Thanks.
All right. Do we have any other questions? Okay. I think everyone else is clear.
Can I ask one more if there are none? Sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think you're in Singapore, right? I think the regulation must be a lot stronger and is more strict. Is stricter in Singapore, right? So I think I mean I'm not sure if you're okay if we can have a if I understand maybe I can email you on certain things that how can we explore as in Malaysia, maybe just I mean if you're okay to share lah. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. No, happy to touch base, right? Always, and happy to discuss more. Just on that point, yeah, you're right that this is the a regulated market. So that also I think that's something which is very important because that also drives how you build your MVP. Just as an example, right? If it were not regulated, we would not for MVP. We would not bother with the insurance partner. We would just go to the merchant and say that, hey guys, we will take the risk. You go, we will sell it for you. We just want to see that, are consumers buying the product or not? Are consumers claiming or not? We will take the risk, right? You guys don't worry about it. And you just pay us this. But we can't do that because it's regulated. So, whereas in like a pure play MVP sense, you would do that. You would be like, okay, you don't need anyone else. You just take, per se, you put aside, say, $100,000 or whatever is the number. So, okay, I'm going to blow this up in taking the risk. And the actual transaction size as I get. But again, so some of these regulations also play a role in terms of how do you plan doing your MVP as well.
Yeah, because we're building something like that as well, but it's just not that on warranty insurance, but more to all sorts of insurance. So I think I mean, after listening on you sharing that, it's also a challenge in Singapore, in API. So it makes us feel a little bit better lah. So because we're still processing offline, So okay. Singapore is ahead, and it's also that way. So I think okay, in Malaysia, it's still nice lah.
No, we are in the same boat.
All right, that's cool. Okay, thank you. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, I know. No, thanks.